Welcome to RoguePlanetoid Podcast, where each episode you can find insights for developers, whether you're a beginner or an experienced professional for Microsoft and related platforms, along with related technology and so much more to help keep current, keep coding. Hello, I'm Peter, and welcome to the second episode of the RoguePlanetoid Podcast, where I'll be talking about the Windows App SDK. First of all, there's been many user interface platforms for developers supported by .NET, starting back in 2001 when .NET was released with Windows Forms, which is still supported in modern .NET today. Windows Forms or WinForms allowed developers to create Windows applications using a WYSIWYG, or what you see is what you get interface, as well as being able to add controls and elements during runtime. But it did have its limitations. So in 2006, Windows Presentation Foundation was released, or WPF, which also introduced XAML, which is Extensible Application Markup Language, which also meant you could separate the UI design of an application from the functionality. And this actually introduced a designer workflow, so not only could you write your code in Visual Studio, a designer could use an application called Microsoft Expression Blend, and they could also do the design work so you could get a good workflow going there. Silverlight followed a year later, which was originally JavaScript, but then later was a slimmed down version of WPF that ran in a browser using a plugin. This same technology would actually be later used to power Windows Phone applications as well on that platform. Later, Windows 8 would also use XAML with .NET for its native applications on that platform, where you could build modern UI-style applications. This then led on to the Universal Windows platform, which actually allowed not only Windows applications to be developed, we could also support mobile applications with Windows 10 Mobile, along with devices such as Xbox and HoloLens. And even today, you can still write applications for Xbox and HoloLens using the Universal Windows platform. Windows App SDK was a result of changes in strategy within Microsoft, such as the end of the Windows 10 mobile platform and the consolidation of the Universal Windows platform to basically be just for Windows. It was decided to bring together native Win32 development and the Universal Windows platform together, and this was known as Project Reunion, that resulted in the creation of the Windows App SDK, which would use WinUI 3.0, previous versions being introduced with the Universal Windows platform. The Windows App SDK would also support earlier versions of Windows, in fact, from Windows 10 version 1809 up to the very latest version of Windows 11. But today, there's a few more choices you can also take if you want. .NET developers can use .NET MAUI or the .NET Multi-Platform App UI. This allows .NET developers to target for iOS and Android, as well as Windows, and there's also a Tizen implementation supported as well. There's also third-party platforms as well available, such as the Uno platform, which is also based on WinUI, and Avalonia UI, which is seen as a spiritual successor to the Windows Presentation Foundation. If you want to learn a bit more about Uno platform, you can do so at platform.uno or Avalonia UI, that's avaloniaui.net. Or if you want to learn about .NET MAUI, you can visit net.microsoft.com/apps/MAUI, and you can find any links in the show notes. What is the Windows App SDK? Basically, the platform for building native applications for later versions of Windows 10 and the current versions of Windows 11, and it basically provides a unified set of APIs as well as tools to build applications for Windows Desktop. The Windows App SDK is not tied to operating system releases from Microsoft, unlike previous versions of the UI platforms like the Universal Windows platform, so it can be updated more frequently to add more features. And the Windows App SDK is being continuously evolved to add more features, as well as providing a target platform for .NET MAUI, as well as things like React Native. Windows App SDK supports both WinRT APIs, along with native APIs within Windows. To learn more about Windows App SDK, you can visit learn.microsoft.com/windows/apps/windows-app-SDK, or you can check out the link in the show notes. Windows App SDK is always adding new features that developers can take advantage of in their applications. One feature includes Windows 11 widgets, which are based on the adaptive cards technology, which is currently used for elements within Microsoft Teams, the Microsoft Bot framework, as well as other platforms. Widgets basically provide a way for users to see information from applications as well as interact with those applications from the widgets dashboard within Windows 11. And these widgets themselves can be updated from the application. You can learn more about creating widgets using the Windows App SDK by visiting learn.microsoft.com/windows/apps/develop/widgets/widget-providers. Or you can find out about adaptive cards, which will allow you to try out and design any widget that you want to create by visiting adaptivecards.io. And again, you can check out any links in the show notes. Windows App SDK is something any .NET developer can get started with today. You can follow any tutorials I've written about Windows App SDK on my website, tutorialer.com, which includes how to get set up and started, including what you'll need to install, and beginning writing your first application with the Windows App SDK. There's examples showing how to display basic features such as how to display a dialog with a message, use the command bar to access functionality, or even take advantage of notifications such as badges, which allows you to show like numbers and notifications on the application icon, or even how you can display a toast notification. There's also some games as well, which are a bit more fun. So you can write a memory game, a dartboard as well, a racing game you can play, and a few others as well. And as of recording, there's 50 Windows App SDK tutorials added, with many more to be added in the future. To find my tutorials for Windows App SDK, just visit tutorialer.com/tutorials/WinAppSDK or check out the link in the show notes. Windows App SDK is currently the most modern way of building native Windows applications. It'd be nice if it was supported by other Microsoft platforms such as HoloLens and Xbox, as again, as I mentioned before, they only are supported by the Universal Windows platform. So it'd be good for developers to be able to target those platforms using the Windows App SDK. But alternatively, they could be targeted by .NET MAUI instead. So we'll see about how those could be supported in future to allow developers to write applications for those. Being able to use the latest features of Windows using the Windows App SDK is a great selling point, along with having access to as many native APIs as possible and with support for even more coming with each release. And hopefully, this will be supported for a long time, as when developing applications, it's really important to make the right choice for how you're going to develop your applications. I know as a Universal Windows platform developer, it would have been nice to know the platform wasn't going to be supported much longer, far sooner, so I could make that choice to switch to a different platform. I used the Universal Windows platform for a long time as a developer, and now I'm using the Windows App SDK. It does have a lot of the features of Universal Windows platform, but there are still a lot of features that are missing, such as Ink Canvas and a few others as well. Although I have brought that up when I've been able to say add that functionality as well. So it'd be great to be able to see that functionality come to the Windows App SDK. Even as a developer, you've got other choices now. You don't have to just write native applications. You can write cross-platform applications. That's where things like the third-party platforms like Uno platform and Avalonia UI come in, as well as Microsoft's own .NET MAUI, which also can target Windows as well. If you're a developer using Windows App SDK, it'd be great to be able to hear from you and share any projects that you're using Windows App SDK for. If you're a developer using Windows App SDK, it'd be great to be able to hear from you and share any projects you're using for the Windows App SDK. And the Windows App SDK is certainly something I'm going to be using in the future to develop my own applications. So it'd be really nice to hear from people who are using it as well. Maybe have you on the show in a future episode to talk about it as well. Also, I'd like to know if the Windows App SDK would be a good choice for you. So again, if you want to do that, then you can just get in touch on Twitter at twitter.com/RoguePlanetoid, or you can check out the link in the show notes. It's really good to be able to talk about the Windows App SDK on this episode, as it's not something that you tend to hear much about, as it's one of the key platforms that Microsoft currently have for developing applications on Windows. Thanks for listening to the Rogue Planetoid podcast, where you can find insights for developers, whether you're a beginner or an experienced professional using Microsoft and related platforms, along with related technology and so much more. You can find any links in the show notes for this episode or visit rogueplanetoid.com/podcast for details of this episode and podcast. Keep current, keep coding. Rogue Planetoid Podcast is a production of Clirinton.